In the early chapters of Genesis, just before the story of Noah and the Great Flood, the Bible gives us a few strange and cryptic verses. They talk about a forbidden union between a group called the Bnei Ha'elohim, a mysterious group from the Hebrew Scriptures, and the daughters of men. This crossover gave birth to a race of beings spoken of in hushed tones, towering figures of immense power and legendary fame. They were called the Nephilim. Their story isn't just a myth, it's a dark and fascinating chapter in theology, a tale of forbidden unions, unchecked power, and a corruption so deep it pushed the world to the brink. This is the story of the giants who walked the earth and how their existence is tied to the most famous cataclysm in history.
Let's journey back to a time shrouded in the mists of antiquity. The Book of Genesis paints a picture of a young earth, teeming with life. Humanity, descended from Adam and Eve, was doing what it was told, being fruitful and multiplying. Civilization was spreading, but as humanity grew, so did a shadow. Genesis chapter 6 opens with a startling statement. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the Bnei Ha'elohim saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. This brief passage is the key that unlocks the entire saga. It introduces two groups, the Bnei Ha'elohim and the daughters of men, and their interaction sets the stage for a global catastrophe. The identity of the Bnei Ha'elohim has been debated for millennia and has led to two powerful and very different interpretations.
So, who were the Bnei Elohim? Were they divine beings or just regular men from a specific family? The answer changes everything. The first theory, and definitely the most dramatic, says the Bnei Elohim were fallen angels. This ancient interpretation, popular in early Jewish tradition, suggests a group of angels willingly ditched their heavenly posts. The non-canonical but historically significant Book of Enoch gives a vivid, chilling account of this. According to Enoch, 200 angels called the Watchers, led by one named Semjazah, looked down, lusted after human women, and made a pact on Mount Hermon to go through with a forbidden plan. Their descent was an act of cosmic treason. They left their proper domain, took on physical forms, and had relations with human women, a profound violation of the created order. This view is bolstered by a couple of New Testament passages where the apostles Peter and Jude mention angels who sinned and abandoned their proper dwelling and are now held in gloomy darkness awaiting judgment. Many theologians connect these imprisoned spirits directly to the Watchers from the Book of Enoch. However, there's another, more grounded interpretation. Many scholars, ancient and modern, argue this is a story about two distinct human families. In this view, the Bnei Elohim were the descendants of Adam's righteous son, Seth, and the daughters of men were from the line of his corrupt son, Cain. The sin, therefore, wasn't a supernatural crossover, but a spiritual one. The holy line of Seth, which had a history of walking with God, began to intermarry with the ungodly line of Cain. This represented a great apostasy, a watering down of faith that blurred the lines between the sacred and the profane, leading to a generation that turned its back on God. While less sensational, this view frames the narrative as a profoundly human tragedy of spiritual decay.
Whichever interpretation you lean toward, the result was the same: the birth of the Nephilim. Genesis 6:4 states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the Bnei Ha'elohim went into the daughters of men and had children by them. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown." The name Nephilim itself is a bit of a mystery. It comes from the Hebrew root word nephal, which means to fall. So you could call them the fallen ones. But when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek in the Septuagint, the translators used the word gigantes, which is where we get our word giants. This translation choice heavily influenced how the Nephilim were understood for centuries. They were seen as the mighty men, heroes of a dark sort, famous not for their virtue, but for their sheer power. The Book of Enoch, which, remember, is not in the biblical canon for most Christians and Jews, really expands on their terrifying nature. It describes them as massive giants who devoured all of humanity's resources. When the food ran out, they reportedly turned on animals and then on humans themselves, spreading violence and even cannibalism. This text also claims the fallen watchers taught their human partners and Nephilim children forbidden knowledge, heavenly secrets humans weren't meant to have, like advanced warfare, deception, and sorcery, filling the world with corrupting knowledge.
The presence of the Nephilim was more than just a problem. It was a contamination. They were an abomination born of rebellion, and their actions, along with the forbidden knowledge they supposedly wielded, plunged the world into lawlessness and violence. The Bible describes this period with a chilling summary in Genesis 6:5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This was the world that had taken shape. While the Bible doesn't explicitly state that the Nephilim were the sole cause for the flood, many traditions, heavily influenced by texts like Enoch, see their emergence as the tipping point. The corruption was total. It wasn't just a few bad apples. The very fabric of human society had been desecrated. The Nephilim became the ultimate symbol of this decay, beings of incredible power but utterly devoid of godliness. A divine reset was becoming necessary.
Faced with a world drowning in its own wickedness, the Bible says God's heart was filled with pain. The flood is framed not as an act of petty anger, but as one of profound sorrow and cosmic surgery. The world was terminally ill, and the only solution was to cleanse the earth and start over. The flood was a direct response to the overwhelming evil that humanity had embraced. It was designed to wipe the slate clean, to eradicate the polluted culture of violence and rebellion that had brought creation to its knees. In this context, the description of Noah gets a fresh layer of meaning. Genesis 6:9 describes Noah as a righteous man, blameless in his generations. While this almost certainly refers to his moral and spiritual integrity, some have speculated it could also hint at a pure lineage in a world of unholy mixtures. Most scholars, however, maintain that blameless refers to his character, making him the last bastion of true faithfulness. The flood, then, was an act of preservation as much as destruction, preserving humanity's future by eliminating the monstrous legacy that had corrupted the world.
The story should have ended there. The waters receded, Noah's family stepped onto dry land, and the world was cleansed. Yet, Genesis 6:4 throws us a curveball with a baffling clause. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. How is that possible? If the flood wiped out all land-based life not on the ark, how did giants pop up again? The mystery deepens hundreds of years later when Moses sent 12 spies into the promised land of Canaan. They came back with a terrifying report. They claimed to have seen giants in the land, specifically the descendants of Enoch. In Numbers 13:33, the scared spies declare, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." This has sparked a few theories. One is that a second, smaller incursion of the Bnei Elohim happened after the flood. Another is that a genetic trait for giantism was carried on the ark,
perhaps through one of Noah's daughters-in-law. A third and very plausible interpretation is that the terrified spies were using Nephilim as hyperbole, a legendary catch-all term for the huge, scary warriors they encountered in Canaan. Whatever their origin, these post-flood giants became legendary enemies for the Israelites. The Bible mentions Og, the giant king of Bashan, whose iron bed was reportedly over 13 feet long. And of course, there was Goliath of Gath, the Philistine champion slain by a young David. These stories show that even if the original Nephilim were wiped out, their legacy, whether genetic or just legendary, cast a long, intimidating shadow over the ancient world.
Among the post-flood giants, one name stands above all others: Goliath of Gath. His story is the quintessential underdog tale, but it's also the final dramatic chapter in Israel's war against the giant clans. Goliath wasn't just a tall warrior. The Bible describes him as a remnant of the Anakim, who were considered Rephaim, a term often used for the giant clans. Some scholars believe that when Joshua drove the Anakim out of the hill country, a few survivors found refuge in Philistine cities like Gath, Ashdod, and Gaza. Goliath was likely a descendant of this remnant. His appearance was designed to terrorize. Clad in serpent-like scale armor and wielding a spear with an iron head, he was the embodiment of the fearsome ancient warrior. The battle against Goliath was more than a duel between a shepherd boy and a giant. It was a spiritual showdown. For the Israelites, Goliath represented the last vestige of that monstrous pre-Israelite power that had made their ancestors feel like grasshoppers. David's victory, therefore, was not just a military triumph, but a theological one, proving that faith in God could overcome the most intimidating physical threats. After David and his mighty men defeated Goliath and his relatives, the biblical narrative largely falls silent on the subject of giants, suggesting their reign of terror had finally come to an end.
The story of the Nephilim doesn't exist in a vacuum. It resonates with a wider world of ancient mythology, where tales of demigods and god-human hybrids are common. Many cultures have stories of powerful beings born from the union of divine and mortal figures. In Greek mythology, for instance, the Titans and the demigod heroes like Heracles share thematic similarities with the Nephilim. These beings are often figures of immense power who disrupt the cosmic order and are eventually subdued by a higher divine authority. Some scholars suggest that these stories, from the Mesopotamian Apkallu, divine sages, to the Greek Titans, might stem from a shared cultural memory or a common way of explaining the world's ancient evils and the origins of civilization. The biblical authors may have deliberately framed the Nephilim story to counter these pagan myths. Instead of celebrating these hybrid beings as heroes, the Bible portrays them as abominations, a definitive sign of humanity's corruption that necessitated divine judgment. In this light, the Nephilim narrative serves as a powerful theological statement, asserting that mixing the sacred and the profane leads not to glory, but to chaos and destruction. This cautionary element ensures the legend of the Nephilim continues to fascinate and disturb, acting as a powerful symbol of forbidden power and cosmic rebellion. This journey into the hidden history of the Nephilim reveals a side of the biblical narrative that is often overlooked, one filled with cosmic drama, forbidden secrets, and monstrous giants. It's a story that challenges us to look deeper into the ancient texts we thought we knew. If this exploration into the shadows of the past has captured your imagination, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the Bible's greatest mysteries. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new investigation. The story of the Nephilim is a profound and unsettling cautionary tale. It's about the dangers of crossing divinely established boundaries, the devastating results of pride and rebellion, and a corruption so deep it required the world to be washed clean. Whether seen as the literal half-angelic giants from the Book of Enoch, or as a powerful metaphor for humanity's spiritual collapse. The Nephilim stand as a testament to a world that had lost its way. Their towering forms represent the horrifying peak of pre-flood sin, a world so full of its own power and renown that it forgot the God who made it. Their destruction in the Great Flood is a stark reminder that divine order, though it can be challenged, will ultimately be restored. But their legend lives on, echoing through myths of titans and demigods and our own fascination with giants. It forces us to ask some big questions about the unseen realm and the ancient forces that have shaped our world. What do you believe? Were the Nephilim the literal hybrid offspring of angels, or do they represent humanity's fall from grace in a more symbolic way? Does their story hold a lesson that is still relevant for us today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.